Hello everyone and good afternoon. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the stream. Let me just confirm that we are indeed live before I can begin with today's video. Okay, so we are live on Twitch and I'll be uploading the end of this video to YouTube, so no worries. Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to be building a COVID-19 application similar to this. Basically, I've done this already and I've deployed it to Netlify, and this is the link right here. Let me open up my magnifier so that I can show you. So this is the link that I have: covid-19-webapp-tsb.netlify.app, and that is what we're going to be building today. And we're going to be using the Postman API, which is it's updated daily. And if you go to this link, you'll notice that I have a link to the actual API right here, and then I also have a link to the API documentation if you need to read more about it. But just taking a look at the API itself, you can see that this is everything that we get, and we are mostly focusing on this countries array because we want to get the data for the individual countries, which is quite a lot. As you can see, if I were to scroll down all of this all the way down to Zimbabwe. Okay, so I'm just going to close this down. Okay, you know what, instead of closing it, because we actually need it when we're building the application, I'm just going to leave it open, and then I'm going to open the documentation, which is right here, and you can see that this is the default API. If I go to this is basically like a documentation of how the routes that are available in this API. So the path of countries returns all the countries, associated provinces, and whatnot. But basically what we're going to be doing for this application is we're going to be using the /summary, which is basically our API that I've just showed you right now. And for all of this, I'm going to leave all of these links in the description. So I'm just going to close this, and then now I'm going to close this as well. And then now I'm going to show you that the GitHub repository for this, it's github.com/sancthomas/covid-19-app, and you can see I deployed it quite a while ago. So basically that's all that we're going to be doing in this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy it, not past tense. I hope you enjoy it, and leave a like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and if you're following on Twitch, remember to follow as well. So you can begin right away, and I already have my server running, my default React application. And how I did that is, if you check in my terminal, let me just scroll back to the top. I give it a really long command right here. So what basically this means is that I'm going into my desktop, and then I'm creating a new React application called COVID-19 app. And then I'm going into that folder that is created by React, and then I'm opening Visual Studio Code, and I'm running my development server. All of this is right from the terminal. That's why if I scroll down, you'll see that it's compiled successfully, and now I can view it in my browser on localhost 3000. That's why I can see this. So if you want to follow along, that's basically all you have to do, because I'm starting it all from scratch. So I'm just going to zoom out a bit, and then I can minify this, and then I'm going to go into Visual Studio Code. Now don't worry about this ESLint cache folder. The reason why it's created is because I've started my development server. So this is not something that I've created myself, and as you can see, it's just a bunch of gibberish to most people. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do obviously is clean up my index.html, and I'm going to grab all of this, remove it, grab all of this up to the manifest JSON and remove it, and I'm going to grab this and remove it, and then I'm going to change this title to COVID-19 application, like that. And then I hope I remember to change this theme color. So let me just say up here, change theme color, right? And then once I do that, I can delete this manifest JSON file, otherwise it will throw some errors in the console. And then I'm going to go into my source folder, and I'm going to delete app.css, and then I'm going to delete app.test.js, and basically these two files as well as the logo. So I'm going to delete them as well, so that I only have the index.js. Close this. so that I only have the index.js, the index.css, and the app.js. And obviously, if I take a look at our application, it's crashed. The reason why I'm trying to import files that I've already deleted. So I need to remove this from here, and then remove this, and save that. And then in index.css, I'm going to remove this, and then I'm going to remove this as well, and this, and I'm going to replace this font family with something that we're going to get from Google Fonts called Robotoslab, and the fallback of sans serif, like that. Okay, so at the top right here, I'm just going to place a comment and say import font, and then I'm going to go into app.js, and I'm going to remove this because we have deleted these two files, and then I'm going to remove this as well, and then just return a div that says hello world, like that. So I'm going to save this, and now our application should be back. Let me reload it so that we can actually see that we are returning hello world. Now the first thing that I want to do is get Tailwind CSS, because that's what we're going to be using for our styling. So I'm going to head over to cdnjs.com, and then I'm going to search for Tailwind CSS, and then just copy this link and then paste it inside my public folder in index.html right there. And then once I do that, then I'm going to go to Google Fonts, so fonts.google, and then I'm going to search for Robotoslab, this font right there. And then I'm going to grab the 400 weight and the 700 weight as well, so these two, and then I'm just going to grab the import right there, and then in index.css I'm going to place it right there. So now this should take up the font that we have right there, and if I'm going to check into my application once again, we should see that our font has changed. Okay, so I think I can close this down because we don't need it, and I can close this repository as well. And I'm going to be building this mobile first, so I'm just going to place this to the side of the screen, and then this to the other side. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is grab this link to the API. I'm just going to copy it, and then inside my source folder, I'm going to create a new file and call this, I'm just going to call it fetch.data.js, like that. And then I'm going to say RAFCE, which is a shorthand property to create a React arrow function component. It creates a React arrow function component and it exports it as default, and I can do this using the extension that is called ES7 React Readers GraphQL and React Native Snippets, this extension right there. So you will need to install it in order to use the shorthand properties that I've just showed you. Okay, so once I do that, then I'm just going to place a variable above this called URL. Okay, and then I'm going to say the URL is equal to this. And one thing that I've just remembered is I want to use Axios instead of the fetch API. So I'm just going to open up my terminal and I'm going to say npm install Axios, like that, which is basically an npm package that allows us to do a bit more functionality than the fetch API, where we can create, read, update, and delete data using Axios, but we can't do it using the fetch API. Now we're not going to be using this for so much, it's only going to be used to fetch the data, and basically that's it. So before I do this, I need to import at the top, use state to set up my state values, and then use effect where I can call in the function that fetches my data. So right away I'm going to set up my state values, and I'm going to say const, what should I call them? I'm returning countries, so let me say countries and set countries. And this is coming from use state, and by default it's going to be an empty array, because once we fetch our data then we're going to populate it, so it's going to be empty for now. And then I'm going to set up my use effect, set up my callback function, and set up an empty dependency array so that it only runs on the initial render. And then I'm going to say let me call this function fetch country data, like that, which is going to be an asynchronous function, so async, like that, and then set up my arrow function. And then I'm going to say const response equals to await, wait, is it await or is it await axios.get? await Axios dot get, and we're getting the URL. Wait a minute, is this the syntax for it? I've forgotten the syntax a bit. Okay, that's okay. If this is not the syntax, then I'm just going to Google it in the npm packages, and then I'm going to say const countries equals to await. Actually, you know what, we don't really need this. Once we get this, we're already getting the response in JSON format, so we don't need to say response to JSON. Right away I can just say set countries into countries, into response, because that's the variable that I have right there. So let me save this, and if it crashes and burns, then I'm just going to reuse the fetch API instead. So in order to do this, let me just call this function because I usually forget. So fetch country data, and then I'm just going to console log the response so that I can see what we get back in our console. And then once we do that, then I'm just going to import this into my app.js and render it so that you can actually see what's happening. So at the top right here, I'm going to say import fetch data from it's called fetch data. What am I doing? Fetch data, like that, and then just render it by saying fetch data, like that. So let's save that and let's see. Okay, let me inspect and get the console, and we get an object because we're console logging. So we get an object. Let me just open this up a bit more, and we say we get a config, which is our URL. Okay, we are not going to be using that. Let's see, our data should be it, right? So we get back our data right there, and we need the countries array, which, as you can see, it's an array of 190 items, and then it's display 0 to 99 and 99 to 189. Excuse me. Okay, so once we are able to do this, then what I want to do instead, because this is technically an object that we're getting back, and if you look inside our application, I'm passing in the response into the countries. But remember that in order to display our data that we get, we will need to use the map method, and the map method being an array method, then we cannot reiterate over an object. So what I want to do here is pass in response dot let me just confirm. Actually, this is much easier because it's on a much bigger screen. So I want to pass in response dot countries, and that should be it. Response dot countries. Let me console log response dot countries, and let's see. Go back into our application, and it's undefined. It is undefined. Why is it undefined? It's because we need to console log response dot data dot countries. Data dot countries. Let's see, dot data dot countries. Reload, and we should get that. Look at that. Let me reload it so that it cleans up a bit. And as you can see, we get now we get the actual array of 190 items, which contains the details for every country, the unique ID for each one of them, the country name, the country code, and all the other data that is basically all of this. So once we're able to do that, now you'll notice that if I were to come right below here and say countries dot length, because length is also an array method, you'll notice that on the screen I should see 190 right there, because we're getting back 190 countries, right? So that means that this is just to confirm that indeed we have populated the use state, which is no longer now an empty array, but instead it is an array called countries with 190 items, which is basically what we are logging in countries.length. So if I just say 100 countries right there, you should see 190 countries right there. So it's looking nice. We are progressing steadily. So I can paste this back to the side, and then I can remove this console log so that it doesn't bloat our application too much. And then right inside here, I'm going to say, oops, what do I do? Inside here, I like returning a fragment first of all. and then I'm going to say let me return a section, right? And this section I'm going to now map over my countries data, so countries dot map, and then for every country I want to destructure all the data that we're going to need in our application. So the first thing that I'm going to need is the ID, which will act as our key. So I'm going to say const first of all, and it's called ID capital, and then we need the country name, which is country like that, and then country code, and then new confirmed, which is the new confirmed cases, and then we need total confirmed, so total confirmed, and then new deaths, and then total deaths, and then new recovered, and then total recovered, like that. And all of this is coming from the country right there. So oops, what's this? What's happening? What is happening? Why is this? Oh, this shouldn't be a square bracket, it should be a curly bracket, like that. Okay, so once we do this, then I can go and set up my return right away. Oops. And I'm going to be returning what do I want to return? I want to return, let me return an article, and this article will have the key of ID, which I've just destructured. And then inside this article, then I want to return an h2 that says the country name, so country, like that. And then once I do that, because technically you know what, I want to place a comma right here and then return the country code immediately, so country code. And then once we have this, because this is basically going to be a list of items, so from the new confirmed cases all the way to total recovered, it's going to be a list of items. So obviously I want to return an unordered list, right? So I'm going to return a UL with LIs. How many LIs? There are about 1 2 3 4 5 6, so 6 of them. And I'm going to just return new confirmed for the first one, like that, and nothing happens really. New confirmed. Why is it giving me it isn't working, or what? Li times 6, really? New confirmed. I want the emit abbreviation, and now it works, of course. So the first one will be new confirmed, the second one will be total confirmed, total, and then the third one will be new deaths, like that. Just place that inside. The fourth one will be total deaths. The fifth one will be new recovered, like that. And then the final one will be total recovered, like that. Okay, it should be fine. So let me save this, and then we can look at our application, and we should see all of this looking nice. Okay, so once I do this, then I've just remembered that I want to show you something else. So I'm going to set up another state value, and I'm going to call it is loading, and then I'm going to say set is loading, set is loading, and set it to use state. And by default, because when you're loading the application, it's going to be loading by default, so I want it to pass in the boolean value of true. And then once we fetch our data right here, then I'm going to set this is loading function to false, so that we no longer display the loading. So I'm going to say set is loading and pass in false. And then once I do this, I want to actually use this variable, and the way I can use that variable is inside this section. I'm just going to grab all of it like that, just cut it out, and then I'm going to pass in some curly brackets, and I'm going to say that if is loading is true, then I want to use a ternary operator, which is basically a question mark, if it is true, then we display a few things inside here, and then if it is false, then we say a full colon, and then we pass in basically our section that we've just destructured. So this is not, these dots aren't really what we're passing in. Basically what I'm saying is that if it is loading, then I want to return an h1 that says loading, to show the user that indeed we are fetching the data before it's being displayed. And then once the loading has finished, so meaning once all of this data has been fetched, we set is loading to false, which will change this to false. And once this changes to false, then this will no longer show, and instead this section will now show that we've just destructured. So let me save that, and we should see loading, as you can see right there on the top. Let me do it again, and you can see loading. Come on, you see loading, and then it displays the data once it fetches it. So I just want to make this bigger, so I'm going to give this a class name of text for XL and text center and margin top of 32, and then I'm going to say I think that should be it. So let's see, it should now appear on the center somewhere here. Let's see, and loading, and then once it finishes loading, then we can display our data. Okay, so once we do that, then obviously the next thing that we need to do is now figure out how we want to display this data. So I'm going to go into this section right away, and I'm going to give this a class name of grid and grid columns 1 and a gap of 10. And then inside the body, inside my index CSS, I have cannot read properly, map of undefined. What? What was that error really? Let me save this, let me see. What was that error? Was that just a bug or something? Okay, so let me just continue to study. So in my index CSS, I want to give the body a default background color, which is a bit darker. So I'm going to say the background color for this will be the Tailwind class for this is text gray 900, and the CSS is 111827, the CSS hex code, which should give it this dark background color. And I've just remembered that this is also going to be my theme color in index HTML, so let me just do that before I forget, like that. And now I can close this down, and I can close the index CSS. Maybe let me not close it. So inside this section, I want the text to be white so that we can actually see what it is we're styling. And then I'm going to say padding on the X should be let me give it 10 so that it pushes a bit inwards. And then I'm going to say padding on the Y, right there, padding on the Y, I'm going to give it let me see, 5. Let's see how 5 looks too small. Let's say 10. If it is 10 for both of them, I can just say padding 10, like that. Okay, now for each of these sections, not for the sections but for each of these articles, I want a slightly light color than the background color right here. So I'm going to give this article a class name of bg gray dash, let me say 700, which is this right there. And then I'm going to say padding on the X of 5 and padding on the Y of 4, padding on the Y of 4, which should move this inwards. And then I'm going to say rounded small, which will have some rounded borders, just a bit. It's very subtle. Let me just make it into large. It's very subtle, but it's actually nice looking. And then for each of these H2s, I'm going to go inside. Why do I keep doing that? I want this H2 to have a green background color, so I'm going to say text green, not a background color but the text color. So text green of 500. We should make them like this, right? And then say font bold and text for Excel. Make it just a bit bigger. Let me say 600. Nope, 400. I want it just a bit lighter. There you go. So 400. And then what do I want? I want this to have a class name of flex. Let me see what happens here. Oh, you know what? We need to add some kind of flags to show what kind of data it is we are presenting. So this will say new confirmed, right? So that you can have some kind of text saying that these are the new confirmed cases and everything else. Okay, and if I remove this flex, then we should see this aligned to the bottom. Or not. Maybe not. Let me just place this inside a span. Span, really? Emmet doesn't want to work today. So place this inside a span, and then I'm going to do the same thing for every one of this. So I'm just going to take all of this and say this is should be placed inside a span like that, and then I'm going to grab this, cut it out, and oops, what am I doing? What am I doing? This should just say total confirmed like that. This should say new deaths. This should say total deaths. This should say new recovered, and then finally this should say total recovered like that. Let me see how this looks. So we should have this. Now I want to because basically all of this will have the same styling. So what I want to do is, let me just remove this, and then I'm going to select every list item using the Alt key. So just hold down the Alt key and then click where you want the cursor to appear. So for each of these list items, because they're going to have the same classes, I'm going to give this a class name of margin on the bottom, not on the bottom really, margin on the Y of 3, which should separate them out just a bit, as you can see. And then I'm going to say give this what am I doing? Why did you disconnect? Margin Y of 3, and then I'm going to say flex, and then item center, and then justify between, if I can spell it, which should now place this all the way to the end. So let me save that, and there you go. So it's looking nice, almost have everything that we need, except I've just remembered that we need the date so that we can show that this was recently updated and it's not some outdated information. And how do we do that? We can just come inside here and destructure the date. So I'm just going to go to the bottom right there and say this is the date, and then right at the bottom of this list item I'm going to add another list item, and then I'm going to say place it inside a span and say this should say the date, and then I'm just going to display the date like that. And then I'm going to copy these classes that I have, copy this, and then just paste them inside this, and we should check back and see a random date, not really a random date, but some kind of gibberish date that we're going to format using moment, which is another npm package. So I'm going to say npm install moment like that, and then once it installs, then we are going to format this date. But for now I just want to add some kind of flag right on the top so that we can know what we are looking at. So in order to do that, I'm going to create another component. Right in the source folder, I'm going to create a new file called header.js, right? And then I'm going to say RAFCE once again, and then I want to return a main right now. And then inside this main, I'm going to have an H1 that says COVID-19 web app, and then below this I'm going to say powered by the postman API like that. And for this I'm not going to place the links to the JSON API and the documentations. So I need to render this out, and I can do that by just going into app.js, copy this down, and then just change this to header, and then just render this as header like that, which should now appear at the top. As you can see, it's right there. It's only blacked out. So let's fix that. I'm going to go inside this main, give this a class name of text white, and then text center, and then padding y of 20. That's too much. Let me say padding y of 5. Oops, padding y of 5, like that. You know what, padding top, I want padding top of 10. Okay, there you go, that looks much better. And then I want to make this bigger, of course, so give this a class name of text for XL. Right, looking nice. And then what else? Let me add some padding on the x-axis, padding on the x of 2, so that in case you have a smaller device width, then this doesn't go end to end. Instead, it leaves just a small space. So save that, and then I'm going to add some margin on the bottom of this header so that it pushes away from the paragraph. So I'm going to say margin bottom of 3, pushes it down. Okay, looking nice, fantastic, amazing. Okay, so what's remaining? What is remaining? Only to format the date, right? So let me check that out, and we can see that moment has finished installing, and you can go into your package JSON and confirm that it has indeed installed right there. And we also installed Axios. So once you've installed moment, I can go into my fetch data component, because technically this is what we want to format the date. And right at the top, I'm going to say import, really this should be fast. I'm going to say import moment from moment, like that. And then once I do that, I can go back to the bottom, and right inside here, I'm just going to call moment, and I want to format it in terms of the month, the day, and the year. So that's how you do it. And then I'm just going to format it like that, and this should work. Wait, what am I doing? This is not the syntax. The syntax is inside here. I'm going to pass in template literals so that I can use a variable, which is basically our date that we destructured. So call date inside here, and then call the format, and I'm going to format it in terms of the month, the day, and the year, like that. So let's save that, and this should now format it correctly. Reload this. Okay, there you go. So this is February 3rd, 2021. And basically it's basically been updated. All of it has been updated today. And if you want to go a step further, what you can do is also format this in terms of hours, minutes, and seconds, because that's when the difference will come in just a bit. So this is 312, this is 312, or not. I thought there might be a difference in terms of time. Nope, there's no difference. Okay, but basically that's how you would use moment to format your dates, and basically that's how you would get your data. And let me see, I've just remembered that we need to scale it up for bigger screens. So I'm going to go inside this section, and I'm going to start right here and say that for small screens, which is basically 640 pixels and above, I want the grid columns to be 2. And then for medium screens, not for medium screens, but for large screens, which is about 1024 pixels, I want the grid columns to be 3. And then for extra large screens, or not extra large, but for 2XL, which is about 1536 pixels, I'm going to say change the grid columns to 4. So let's see how that works. Let me scale it up to 640 pixels, and it should change to 2 grids right about there. I don't like this. In order to fix this, let me just go back into moment, and let me change this to 2 M's instead of 4, which should bring a shorthand date. So Feb, it brings out the what's it called, the month. That's it, the month. But does this really look nice? How do you get the shorthand month? Let me just go into moment.js. Let's see, moment.js home. Let's look at the documentation just a bit. So triple M instead of 2M, so triple M, there you go, which should now say Feb. There you go, that's what I wanted. So so that when I scale it up right about there, and we get that, so it's looking very nice. And then when I continue to scale it up at about 1024 pixels, we should have 3 grids like that. Okay, and then for 2 extra large screens, we should have 4 of them like that. So this is looking quite nice, quite nice. So one thing that I want to do finally before I finish is that in this I'm going to give this a class name of a custom class name of what should I call it? Let me just call it data, because it doesn't really matter all that much. And then I'm going to go into index CSS, and I'm going to add a media query of 1600 pixels and above, and I'm going to target the data class, and I'm going to say that the padding should be how much padding they have on the top, was it 20 pixels? And then I'm going to say 150 pixels on the left and right, so that this pushes inwards just a bit, as you can see, for 1600 pixels, because I don't want it to go all the way to the end. So I think this looks fine, this looks nice and presentable, right? Let me just add a bit more margin between the header and the first thing right here. So I'm going to go back into my fetch data, and I'm going to target this header, and I'm just going to say margin bottom of 5, which should push it down like that. So it's looking nice, looking very, very nice, all the way down to Zimbabwe, right? Yeah, I think that's basically it for this project. It's a very simple project, as you can see, and I've tried to use Axios, just a change of pace, to show you that you can have some multiple ways of doing it. And I've purposely placed this inside my use effect, because usually what I do is I place it outside the use effect. It's all basically all preference to whatever you would want. And then we also have the is loading and set is loading, where if we're fetching the data, then it displays loading on the screen. So that that should be a white color. Let me change this to text white, so that it's actually visible. And let me change this to for large screens to text 8XL, so that it's a big tag. Let's reload that and let's see. There you go. So it says loading, and then once we fetch our data, then it disappears, because we have set is loading to false once we have now fetched our data. So this is pretty nice. It's a really nice project, if I do say so myself, which I do. And if you're on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel quite a bit. And leave a comment, any comment really, but not a spam comment. And I will see you in the next video. This is quite a short stream, because I also want to rest a bit. So I guess I will see you tomorrow with a bit more. And thank you for watching.